Hello, and welcome to the Remind podcast, where we get inside the real estate entrepreneur's mind. My name is Harrison Smith. I'm the Director of Growth with the Matea Group at Keller Williams Realty here in Maine and expanding throughout New England. And I'm joined today by Donna Galluzzo. How you doing, Donna?
Hey, Harrison, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, so good to have you. Thanks for joining us today. So why don't we start off with, for the folks that don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. My name's Donna Galluzzo, and obviously I'm an agent with the Matea Group, Keller Williams. I primarily focus on buyers, and this is I think it's my end of my third year in real estate. It's been great. I love it.
Awesome. So you probably didn't start in real estate, as we find a common trend of people that end up in real estate. So where'd you start off and how'd you get into real estate?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as I talk to a lot of other realtors, I think I have found, we always hub to our like-minded group of people.
Mhm.
I have found a lot of realtors like me who have education backgrounds, social service backgrounds. So that's my deal. I spent, gosh, almost 20 plus years working in the nonprofit slash education world. And that's how I evolved from teaching and then nonprofit work and then eventually nonprofit administration. I evolved to real estate through that path, but not so uncommon among my real estate colleagues, which is interesting as well.
Sure. So when you talk about nonprofits, were these charities, were these organizations? What kind of entities were they?
Great question. Primarily two different ones. One of the nonprofit organizations I worked for did media arts education, and that I did for a very long time, about 16 years. And so the small school that I ran taught media arts, focusing on radio, writing, photography, video. It was really fun. That was a great career. We had gallery openings. The students went on to work in places like public TV, public radio, obviously private consulting, that kind of thing. Was really interesting, and we focused on telling stories, true stories about the state of Maine. So I learned so much about this state of Maine, which was a huge bonus.
That's
And
fun.
now, super fun, super fun. I know many obscure facts about little places. I know great places to eat all over the state, and all sorts of little interesting tidbits from every corner of Maine. So that was really instrumental in helping me with my real estate career, just in terms of the geography of this state.
Sure.
And then the other place that I worked was a very traditional social service nonprofit supporting people at risk and living with HIV and AIDS here in Maine. And that was just tremendous hard work. And as you can imagine, met so many different kinds of people from so many different walks of life, strong connections to our LGBTQ plus community, strong connections to our immigrant, refugee, and asylee community, which is also very interesting and also has a big connection to the way I happen to do my real estate work right now. I'm very interested in working with clients who are uh, disenfranchised, part of minority groups, not born in the US. So, again, a very helpful skill set for the way I want to conduct my real estate work.
Yeah, absolutely. So from nonprofit into real estate, what most attracted you into real estate?
Well, I think the biggest reason, and I say this a lot to buyer clients and sellers that I work with, I grew up in a multi-generational construction family. So I grew up around building. My grandfather
Mm.
was a house builder, kind of a traditional residential house builder. My dad took the company over and elevated it to commercial. And we all worked for my father. My brother and I worked in the field, in the office. I grew up literally going through high school, going from school to work. And my mom worked for the family business. We all did. And through that, I got a real understanding of, curiosity about, a real love for housing, and real estate. So it's always been something that was kind of near and dear to my heart. And then you go off on your own, you become, you hope, a contributing and, uh, I would say a contributing adult in our society,
Yeah.
And that usually at some point gets you motivated to buy a house of your own. So just in terms of my own real estate purchases personally, I also did a lot of interesting real estate purchasing for work, student housing. That was really interesting, getting student housing here in Portland. Also signing commercial lease agreements for different places that I've run. So I got a lot of exposure to different parts of real estate. I met so many great agents, and I love it. So interesting, and it has a very deep emotional connection, a lot of familiarity to great memories for me. So I think that's a big reason why I moved in that direction.
Yeah, that's great. So it wasn't like a singular moment. It was just real estate continued to be a part of your life, and it just kind of grew in the amount of your life it consumed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, anyone who's done nonprofit work, it's funny, I get a lot of a good-natured kidding about the fact that I've probably done it, backwards from some people. I think you find a lot of people work in a for-profit industry and then shift to working for a nonprofit, after they've achieved their success, in air quotes, success.
Yeah.
But, for me, I loved working in the industries that I did. I learned a lot, but it's also exhausting. Running a nonprofit, it's exhausting, battling, to meet budget every year, battling for fundraising every year, competing, sadly, against other tremendously wonderful organizations. That's a tough thing. And for me, it was just time. I thought, "I'm ready to start another career." I joked a lot about when I went into real estate 3 years ago. Right after I went into real estate, this show popped up on TV about this older guy who becomes a police rookie. So the show's called The Rookie. He's in his 40s or something, I think. And I often joke, I was like, "I should contact that show because I'm a I'm a real estate rookie at 55, so never too old to start a new career." And that's exciting too, and that's of interest to me. I was feeling like I have a lot of work time left and just kinda hitting my stride, and I knew I have a great network. I've been in Maine a really long time. So I was curious to try my chops in a new career.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned that your service and educational background and nonprofit experience really helped with how you kind of conduct your real estate business today. So can you explain a little bit about how your business is set up?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, even though I haven't been in the business that long, I feel very fortunate. I feel like I have had good success out of the gate. I think part of that is because I have had a lot of life experience, a lot of different jobs. I think part of that is because I've been in Maine almost 30 years, so I have a really strong local network. I've lived in a lot of places in Maine. So that was awesome for me, and so I feel like right away, what I chose to do was a little different again, kind of from your typical new realtor. I chose to rely very heavily on my network. I Because of my work as an executive director, twice an executive director, that's all you do is network, right?
Mhm.
You're always going to, some kind of meeting, gathering, you're looking at social media. That connectivity with people is really important to me, and I chose to use my skill set there and my skill set as a networker just to basically help promote my real estate career. And I've been very fortunate, as I said, very successful. I've had great help from a lot of colleagues in the office as well. Everyone has been so supportive. But I think that combined with those skill sets that I have, the fact that I'm not at all nervous to talk with strangers, go to social meetings, get up at crazy hours, drive far distances. All that is all stuff that I was not working a non-traditional work week. That's been my life for 25 years. So all of that was a really good fit for my career
Good,
and
good.
the way I conduct my business. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, and you've also chosen to work kind of more heavily with buyer clients versus seller clients. What's your attraction to the buyer client?
I definitely have, and again, I think a couple things that comes back to my love of housing
Mhm.
and my curiosity about housing. I look at homes, it kind of pains me to see an empty home because I look at a home as a living, breathing thing, and when one isn't occupied, it actually really it kind of hurts my heart. So for me, it was logical because of my interest there and my love of the whole idea of building, renovating, remodeling. I really like the idea of working with buyers. It's like a puzzle. I love every buyer client because their personality is so different, and this whole idea of matching this person or family or couple to a neighborhood, a house, just trying to find the right fit for people. I love That's my favorite part of it. It's a great challenge, and it is a challenge, especially in this
Sure.
market, and trying to find places for buyers in this market.
Hmm.
Whew, I don't know that I was prepared for that. I don't know that anybody was.
No.
No, but it's a great challenge. I mean,
Yep.
whether it's a seller's market or not, it's a great challenge when you find all the things align and people are just so elated to be in their home, and you hear about their plans and what they're gonna do. My clients keep in touch with me, I keep in touch with them very regularly. So I'm always getting pictures of house changes, family changes,
Mm.
babies coming, puppies happening, renovations happening, new furniture coming in. So people are great, and I always want my clients to share, what changes are happening in their lives. It's fun. I love that part of it as well.
Yeah, it sounds fun building those relationships and then maintaining them for the long term is, you almost end up, clients turn into friends and it becomes a lifelong thing.
Totally. Absolutely.
So when you look at kind of where you've come from, where you've gotten to, what would you say is, or the one key factor, the most important part of your success?
That's a tough question to answer. I think one thing for me is work ethic.
Hmm.
I think if I had to say consistently across the board, I know I drove well over 30,000 miles in the calendar year, and I think there's a little bit of, good-natured kidding in the office that I'll kinda go anywhere
Yep.
for a buyer or listing. But I have a strong work ethic, and as I said, I've never worked in a job with very traditional hours. I don't like sitting behind a desk. That isn't me either. So I think, that part of me that really enjoys digging in and, figuring out the parts of the puzzle and how they fit together and make sense, and not minding putting in the time to learn or the hours to make it happen. That part has served me really well. I know a lot of buyer agents start out and I've heard a lot of advice about, "Oh, only show this is how you do it so efficiently. Only show so many, narrow the field. Don't drive yourself crazy. Don't," and I've heard a lot of that advice. I actually chose not to do it that way. It didn't work for me, and that could work beautifully for someone else. For me, and I have some clients I've been working with for 2 years. Obviously, we've seen a lot of houses in that time,
Hmm.
and I respect that. Again, it's a part of the puzzle of meeting what the client needs. That's how I look at it. Some clients don't wanna look at that many houses, and that's okay. And other clients need to look at 20 houses so that they can feel really confident that the one they wound up with works for them, you know? So, I have also learned along the way to tell people, even if they're a client or a client couple or family that wanna see a lot, I have also learned to say, "Okay, this is kind of exhausting looking at 4 or 5, 6 listings in a day. So, well, I've learned how to better narrow and direct people, not necessarily by economizing how often we see a home, but really trying to figure out what's most important to them when they look at a home. I think that's really important. Everybody's got a thing that kind of leads the list when they're buying a house, and I think you've got to listen. It's another big skill that I brought
Hmm.
from my other work worlds. You gotta listen to your clients and really hear what's important to them and reflect it back to them. I try really hard to do that when we're on showings or recap. And, I tried just again, sort of like putting the pieces of the puzzle together and gently guiding people in a direction that I feel like is working for them. I pay a lot of attention to when I'm working with my clients to visual cues that they give me, the sound of their voice, their emotional reactions to things. So even if I wind up working with out-of-state clients or virtual clients, if I can have one time with them in person, if they can come to Maine for one weekend and we can look at even a few houses together, that tells me a lot about how to make it work for those clients when we're looking. So
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, a lot of people think of real estate as it's a sales position. You got to be salesy. You've got to close people, sell people. It sounds like for you, this is a service business and not necessarily a sales business.
yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I would say most of the people on the team would say that I'm very customer oriented, customer service oriented. I know that I take a lot of time to show homes. I probably take more time than anybody on the team
Hmm.
to show a house. But I know I'm very thorough. I believe in pointing out the pros and the cons whenever we go somewhere. And I believe in trying to, because education's been a strong part of my life. So a lot of my buyer clients especially will tell me they learned a lot through
That's good.
looking at homes with me. Yeah, I feel like I'm
Yeah,
educating people. It's my goal.
that's great. Yeah, trusted advisor and resource. Absolutely.
Yep,
So, what
absolutely.
would you say has been the most difficult lesson you've learned along the way?
Yeah,
So many, right?
yeah, a lot, honestly. So, in terms of working with clients, I think it's good a good lesson learned is just to remind yourself to let go. Client takes the lead,
Mm,
and that means that sometimes something that's of importance to you or something that you would prioritize is not what your client would prioritize. So, let go of your expectations. That's a hard one.
mm, for sure.
Yeah, we are all challenged in that, all of us, and you never know what's gonna happen in transaction. So, you've just it's a tough lesson to learn. Just you wanna prepare yourself and your clients, but also, you don't know how it's gonna roll. So, you just gotta try to be really calm and not it's great to guide the process, but
Mm,
you can't bully the process into doing what you want it to do. It's gonna be what it'll be.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. That's
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. So, what would you say is the one piece of advice that you wish you had known when you got started?
I think just personally, professionally, I I think you don't I wish people had or I could have if I had known, I guess I would have asked more just about managing it's tough to manage your schedule and
Oh yeah.
and your finances, right?
Hmm.
So, a lot of people said to me, "Be beware of this, be thoughtful of that," especially around managing finances piece. But, I think it's hard to grasp how little you know about that and how what a jolting thing it is when
Hmm.
it's finally there. So that's a big one, I think. That was a big one for me. I wish I had been a little more prepared for the it's kind of like a you know, volatility of earning money. It's just like when it's flowing, it's flowing. When it's not, it's not. And, um, and so you have to be careful, right? Not to get
Yep.
ahead of yourself. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, that's a big one. So that's a big, like a personal, professional piece. I think, what I've really started to understand after several years, for me at least, working with buyers, I I'm at the point where I think next year I'm gonna try to approach my buyer process, buyer education with clients differently. I think I now have a really good grasp of things that need to be repeated again
Mm,
and again and again, things that you can tell clients, but they don't really grasp or hear because let's face it, buying a house is so overwhelming.
that's a lot.
Hugely overwhelming, and I
Yep.
think there's a lot that you can say it 10 times, and so, respecting that people learn differently and they digest information differently, I think I'm gonna try to go about the buyer process, that educational process, a little bit differently next year because I'm starting to grasp, after several years and lots of transactions, what people gloss over that they shouldn't gloss over. So
Hmm.
that's another big lesson, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one. And you're right. There's a when people are buying or selling a home, there's a lot going on. It's a lot to absorb. It's nerve wracking and scary and exciting and all those things. And you're right. That educational component is big because there's a lot of things that happen that people don't truly understand until they're in it.
100%. And and even if you've gone through it before,
Hmm.
maybe you did it 10 years ago once, maybe your clients did it 30 years ago, maybe they've never done it before. Maybe I also think, and you know this, I've bought and sold a lot of real estate since I've gotten into real estate,
Yep.
personally, but I actually applaud myself and my spouse for, going along with all that, with doing that, because I think it's really reminding me what the process is like from a
Yeah.
client perspective, and that's invaluable because even
Yeah.
for us, it's overwhelming sometimes.
Exactly. When you walk in their shoes, you certainly get a different perspective of what they're going through for sure.
Yep, and, a lot of that is around working with the companion vendors in a transaction. So maybe at some point I'll feel really buttoned up about the way I handle buyer education, but there's always something that I learn even now, every single transaction, from the lender, from the title company,
Hmm.
from the inspector, from the vendors who are, giving quotes or doing work, I think, and from the other agents, you can learn about what to do and what not to do from really observing other agents. And that's really important to me too. I try to have a very respectful, communicative, collegial relationship with other agents. I'm a big negotiator. I'm a big fan in finding compromise. That's just how I live my life. That's how I do my real estate work. I think it serves us well when we work together as agents, even on different sides of the transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all trying to work together to the same outcome, you hope. And sometimes you learn that's not always the case, and sometimes it is the case and it goes great.
Absolutely. And there's so many terrific agents here in Maine.
Mhm.
I've also learned, interesting, and I'm learning now to suss this out a little bit more. I've learned that real estate is conducted so differently in every state.
Oh yeah.
That right, the transaction can seem very similar, but it can be so different from certain states. So I realize with people relocating, I do work a lot with relocating buyers. I do a lot with video showings and such, and FaceTime showings, and that, like, whether live or recorded. And what I've learned is really understanding what their experience is in whatever place they're coming from. Even if they haven't bought themselves, they usually have some idea of what the experience is like from talking to family or friends. And often I find myself correcting, well, that's the way you do it in X place, but we don't do it like that here. Our state law is different, or Maine requires X and your state doesn't, or vice versa. And that's been very eye opening, especially with the way people move around the country these days.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the video showings, and I'd love to go back to that for a second. So we're hopefully coming out of a COVID world. You actually excelled in the middle of COVID, earning Rookie of the Year for Keller Williams. So what changes did COVID cause, and why was that such a good fit for how you do business?
Yeah, that was wild, wild times. I think with the seller's market, with COVID creating this particular type of seller's market, I I think we all had to get really good at communicating differently. Um, you know, if you're in person and you're wearing a mask, it's hard to read people.
Mm, for sure.
So it's sort of odd, right? It was like we did a lot, with technology, and, the technology tools have been amazing and allows us to do a lot more. I think oddly enough, through COVID, the benefit of being able to do, FaceTime showings and have that technology, and because we had the safety of the screen in between us, it was almost easier sometimes
Hmm.
get to know people and read people, as opposed to meeting people live and showing them all over the place. You don't have time riding in the car with them. Whenever you're interacting with them, you're wearing a mask. it's very, and you can really listen to people's voice cues, but we learn a lot from our facial cues with clients. And when you lose, 50% of that facial cue, it's huge.
It is.
Huge. Yeah. So that was big. And then COVID created such a fast pace of transaction. And I think what the one lesson that really think I learned with COVID was, because of the seller's market it created, because of the pace of transaction, and because of how deep the competition was for most offers, I learned that obviously not everybody has enough cash to be competitive. So it really hammered the idea that terms mean a lot when you're writing a contract. And I think I got really good at massaging and tweaking terms to make my buyers competitive when they didn't have as much cash as other buyers to plunk down to cover appraisal shortfalls or that kind of thing. And I even heard from other agents that people really appreciated the way I structured my offers, that they were very clear, that they were creative, that I've had more than one agent say to me, "You should teach a class on how to write an offer." So, it's nice to hear from your colleagues, right? That
Absolutely.
that they appreciate that. So those were some big lessons that came out of COVID for me that I will definitely carry through.
Yeah, that's great. And that's really good feedback at really how the market shifted and where the teamwork and communication piece became so important. But also sometimes it's not about the price. It's about the terms of the contract and how you work together. So I think that's hugely valuable, now and also into the future for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, even as the COVID stuff ebbs and flows, the idea that we're going to be existing in some iteration of this market because inventory is so low and will continue to be low for quite some time, that's gonna keep the competition around. And,
Yep.
so that's a big one. And then also other things that I always made sure to do, you know, because interest rates have become, I think, the way this market happened to evolve, it it became very clear that if you weren't that aware of it before, I think buyers are more aware of interest rates than ever before.
Mm,
I think we got to say to buyers, "So here's why you can buy so much more house with these interest rates." And that even when the market corrects at some point, because it will, with interest rates going up, because they will, this is what this will look like potentially in 5 years or 10 years. So I think that was another giant lesson learned for people and agents. Just
yeah.
really thinking, how really does the interest rate affect my payment, my monthly payment, when you come right down to it for a buyer?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a significant changer to that equation. But what to your point, what we learned a lot too is that it's really less about the price and more about that monthly payment. And even as prices escalated and people panicked that houses were getting too expensive, they actually remained almost as affordable as ever through it, because of those rates.
Absolutely. And I think, on the selling side, I think something that I found myself saying a lot, to buyers, just to give them some perspective, but also to clients who are listing, I think there's this old concept that cash is king,
Hmm.
and that wasn't exactly true, meaning you didn't have to buy the house in all cash. What really mattered and what really matters these last couple of years is how you use your cash as a buyer, and then what is the seller getting at the end of the transaction? So there's a creative way to use cash without making an all cash purchase that basically can give the seller the benefit at the end of it all of what feels like an all cash purchase with a lot of assurances and security and, again, coming down to terms. So I think that was a huge lesson for both listings and working with buyer clients.
That is so true. Well, this has been awesome, Donna, to chat about you and your real estate business. For people that want to get in touch with you to learn more about you or talk real estate or hear about the real estate market here in Maine, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Certainly, email is always great. People can email me at donna@kwmatea.com, and that's KWMATEJA. Donna at kwmatea.com. People can call or text me 207-358-9585. But Harrison's going to post it too, I'm sure. When he posts this
So I'll make sure to include it for sure.
Yep. And go on the Matea Group website. There's a link to reaching me there, and I love our group. We have a terrific group of agents. We have a big group. We've done a tremendous volume of transactions these last couple of years. And one thing I say about our group is, what makes us so good is we get you to closing. A lot of people can get you under contract. We get you to closing, and we do it very smoothly, and we have tremendously good admin support. And we're colleagues. We obviously keep ethical distance from each other, but we're rooting for each other and supporting each other. And so there's a lot of good vibe there with the team. So definitely check out the Matea Group website. And Jeff's been awesome. Jeff sells Maine. Do it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, it's been so great to have you. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks.
Would love to have you come back in the future and talk real estate again.
Cool. I would dig that. Very.
right.
Next time I got to bring, I'm reaching down because I'm petting my cutest dog in the world. He's my real estate buddy everywhere I go. So for all you people who like golden doodles, you work with me, you get to meet Teddy, and he's worth the wait. He's pretty awesome.
Teddy, the real estate dog, is very much an informal mascot for the Matea Group, and you'll see him all over the market, looking at properties, running comps. He does it all.
He digs it. It's his favorite career too. There's no doubt about that.
Well, that's awesome. Well, look forward to checking with you again here soon, Donna. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Harrison. I appreciate it.